So if you watched the previous video, you saw a bit about Excel and building Lemonada in an Excel sheet. And there's a lot you can do there. You can do graphs, you can insert pivots, you can insert images, you can do quite a bit within an Excel sheet. And then you can use the file menu to export that to a PDF or something like that, which could be cool if you need to, produce receipts from something or do an invoice, etc. You can use Excel or spreadsheets to do that. However, what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on building out that same data schema, that same customer customer table. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but the notion of storing customers and tracking customer data, as well as storing sales and tracking sales data in MySQL and the MySQL engine. So the first thing we're going to do in this video, the only thing we're going to do in this video is install it. I'm trying to keep these videos short and sweet. So let's look at the MySQL installer. So we're going to type MySQL installer, and we're going to download the MySQL installer from dev.mysql.com. And you'll get sent to this page, and we're just going to download this web community. If your internet's slow, you may want to download this offline installer, have it download overnight, but for the most part, you can just download this web version. There is a little no thanks, just get started, so you don't have to create an Oracle account. So let's do that. And you'll see our installer installs down here. So we're going to run this. And I'm going to take you through the whole installation because there are a few things in the installation I want to really point out to you. So we're going to do custom here, and you can do developer default, but I want to do custom because I want to show you the various items that are installed. Let's click next, and you have all of these products available. So the main product we're going to need is MySQL Server. And if I expand this, you'll see there are different versions. 8 is the latest. So let's expand that, and we'll just grab this 8.0.29. And this is the major version, minor version, and then patch or build number, etc. This is called versioning in software. So it's a way to keep track of the differences. So you'll see 8 is a major version, and there's all these little patches. We'll install the most recent. Let's click next, or to the left here. We're also going to install MySQL Workbench. MySQL Workbench is used to interact with the database in a nice graphical user interface, a GUI. It just makes things a lot easier. You're not going to have to sit and write in a command window. So we're going to install that. And then also we're going to install a Python connector because later in the series I do want to experiment with Python and its data visualization. I haven't had a chance to do that. So let's actually install the Python connector for MySQL. And then one last thing, we're going to install some samples. So there is a database that ships with MySQL called sakila, and it has just some film and some data there that we can use to practice. So I'm going to expand samples and examples, expand samples and examples 8.0, and click next. And here's what we're going to install. Now, if you need other connectors, if you plan on doing .NET development against MySQL, or C++ or ODBC, you might want to install those. For our purposes, you will not need any of those. So let's click next. And here you'll see ready to download, and we're going to click execute. If any of these fail, just hit try again until all of them download. And then we're going to click next. And it tells us we're ready to install, and we're going to execute. So we're going to wait for MySQL Server to install. That's kind of the core package. Workbench is like it's the user interface for interacting, so we don't have to write statements, as I said. We could still write statements, but we get a nice little, basically, computer software to interact with MySQL. So Workbench is installing. After that, it's going to install the connector and the samples, and then we're going to do a bit of quick configuration on our database. And we're also going to install the samples. Installing, installing, installing. I feel like I should fill the silence or tell a joke here. Just drink your tea or drink your coffee or whatever you got going on over there. All right, cool. Python connector installing. All right, let's click next. And now we're ready to configure. Cool. So you can pick your config type. If you're installing MySQL on a server computer to be actually used for a website, there are various options here. If you're installing MySQL on a dedicated computer, only running MySQL and no other servers, this uses a lot more memory. For our purposes, we're installing MySQL locally, and you're going to pick development computer. Now, it's important to note that with services like Amazon Web Services, AWS, or Google Cloud Platform, GCP, you can actually have your database in the cloud, which can be useful. But for our purposes and our practice, we're not going to be doing that during this particular course at the moment. Normally, you can leave this port 3306. I have some other MySQL instances installed on my computer, so I'm just going to switch this to 3307 for my purposes, but you can leave 3306 for yours. So we'll click Next. We'll leave this as is, and the main account for MySQL Server is called root, R-O-O-T, and we're going to pick a root password for that account. So I'm just going to do root for now because it's on my local computer. Password's weak. If you're installing this on a production machine, you want to do something stronger. But we'll click Next. We'll leave all the defaults, click Next, and now we'll execute. And this is going to go through and initialize the databases, initialize the server, start the server, apply security, etc. Now we'll click Finish. So now configuration is complete for MySQL Server. We're going to do the samples and examples. So it's going to ask us for the server, and we're going to put our username and password, root. Check. Okay, great, connection succeeded. Next, and it's going to run some script and install the sakila sample database. So now we'll click Finish. We'll click Next. Installation's complete, and we can start MySQL Workbench after startup. Or we can not, and you can find it in your Start menu by typing MySQL Workbench. So let's open Workbench, and let's show you just what Workbench looks like. So here are your connections. And when you first start, you may or may not have a connection here, but I'll show you what it looks like to add. So we're going to add a connection, and we're going to just call it localhost. We're going to leave this. This is called the loopback address. Really, it just points to your computer. And then we're going to change the port to 3307 for my machine. On your machine, this will be 3306. We can test the connection, and you'll see here it's asking for a password. So we'll put that password in, root. I'm going to save it to my vault. And you'll see here that it connected okay. So normally when you're setting up a new database connection, you want to test it, make sure it's okay. And once that's the case, you can click OK. Now you'll see we have a connection here. And you can add connections to other databases in order to use Workbench on your computer and connect to, let's say, your Amazon Web Service database and do some querying. But for the most part, we're just going to work locally. So let's click this, and it'll actually take us in to our database. So if I look at this, you'll see we have a few databases, and we have sakila here. And if I were to expand tables, you'll see we have a lot of tables. And I'm going to right click one of these, actor, or actually I'm going to right click film and click select. So this is the first SQL statement you may have seen. Select all from sakila.film. And what this is doing is grabbing us all records from sakila.film. So at this point, we're going to stop the video, but what I would invite you to do is look up W3 SQL tutorials. And this will be from W3 schools. And I want you to look up the select statement. There's some cool things you can do with this select statement. For example, we look at this data here. So let's select all from sakila film where title, like, let's do WA. So the title starts with WA and then wildcard, meaning anything else after it's acceptable. So if I were to execute this, you'll see now I'm getting something smaller. And what if I added some stuff to it? And length greater than 90 minutes. So let's look at all films starting with WA, where the length is greater than 90. SQL selects are meant to answer questions. So what if I wanted length greater than 90 or rating is R? So we want any WA movies that are greater than 90 minutes or are rated R. And if I were to run that, you'll see that we get some lists with movies greater than 90, and some are rated R, some are not. So this is querying a database, and usually that's done with SQL select statements. So what I would suggest is W3 Schools, SQL tutorial, select, and kind of go through some of this select statement. In future episodes, we'll be looking at creating databases, creating tables, insert, update, delete, inner joins, joins, and a whole bunch of other information. But if you're rearing to go and you're ready to get started, take a look at selects and try to use these tables here to answer questions. Show me all active customers. Show me all inactive customers who signed up before 2006, whatever. Show me all active customers who have an email that starts with the letter V. That is what creating a database is for, is answering business questions. So anyways, hope this video is helpful. Hope it gets you started on your MySQL journey, and I will catch you in the next one.